Are you learning CSS basics for beginners and want to know how to use CSS front-end developer skills to make your life much easier as a web developer? If so, you're in the right place. Hi, Martin here from MDP Web Development. Today we'll be working on a project that we'll use as a reference project throughout the Web Development for Beginners playlist. Don't forget to check out the playlist from the start to get a better understanding of HTML and our reference project. It's updated each week with new videos. Be sure to stick around to the end to see how to get the project files on GitHub to use throughout this playlist. I'll link to important videos there also. There's a link in the description down below to the GitHub repository where all the source code is. Let's get started.
Before we go on, be sure to watch the Visual Studio Code Editor video. It explains how to get and set up VS Code for use in the Web Development for Beginners playlist. And also watch the video on creating your first web page. I'll link to them in the description below. Here's a summary to get you started. First, create a folder on your desktop and call it Reference Project. Next, download and install Visual Studio Code Editor for your operating system from the link in the description. Open VS Code, then open this folder and create a new file called index.html. In the file content, type an exclamation mark and hit enter. This should create a new standard document for you. Open the file from the desktop folder and it should be a blank page as we have not put any content in it yet. If you get stuck, just watch these videos first.
Front-end developer skills. Front-end developer skills are very important to make development easy and accurate and dependable. The easier you can find errors and issues in the front end, the handier it'll be when you're developing code. In the Chrome browser, we can do anything we want. In any browser, we can do anything we want. If you right-click on most web pages and scroll down the menu, you'll see View Page Source. You can actually view the code from a page, how it's made up. In Chrome Developer Tools, if you go to Extensions in Chrome and Developer Tools, or click F12 on Windows, this is a default development box from Chrome to allow you to debug stuff on your internet, Chrome browser. We'll have the Elements, which shows all the parts of the web page, the console, where any errors might be logged, sources, you can see all the files for the website, and Lighthouse is very important software. This performs performance tests on a web page and lets us know how it's doing for Google. Another handy thing on Chrome DevTools, if you're on a website, you can right-click and you scroll down to the Inspect. And that will open up Chrome DevTools automatically and show you what you just clicked on. And at the bottom then, you see a box model to show you what paddings and margins are set in CSS. Also, Chrome DevTools allow us to preview our website on mobile. Click the mobile button and see what your device would look like. And one very important and powerful feature is also you can change values in the CSS in the browser itself to see how things look. Another thing is the user agent style sheet. This is default in all browsers, so if you don't specify any CSS, the user agent style sheet is used. And of course, if you want to change properties for an object, you have to override the default style sheet with your own CSS. Here we can see on the top left, we have a paragraph of text, a list item, and a button. On the bottom, we can see the CSS. And on the right, we can see your browser with the DevTools opened. We can see in the Elements tab on the bottom, the button is clicked. And on the bottom right, we can see the CSS for that button. On the bottom right, you can see the element, the padding, the border, and the margin are actually set like we have set in the CSS on the bottom left. We can see button padding 5 pixels and margin 10 pixels. And indeed, on the bottom right there, we can see the padding 5 pixels and the margin 10 pixels. This is very helpful when debugging CSS and HTML and JavaScript to see why something doesn't work on a website. Hi, before we move on, please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. Thank you.
So now we're going to open Visual Studio Code and our project and a browser window on the right to preview our project. It's going to go to our desktop and double click on Visual Studio Code. Then we're going to go to the Explorer view and open folder. And mine is on the desktop, so I'm going to go Desktop, Reference Project, select Folder. And here we can see we have our HTML file. If we open the browser view, we can see the reference project folder and the index.html file we created. Now to see the browser window on the right, if you have the live server extension installed, you'll see Go Live button down here on the bottom. And if you haven't, you just have to go out to your desktop, open the folder, and click on the index.html file. So once you've clicked on that file, we're just going to click this Go Live button here. And that'll start up a new browser server window for us. So a handy shortcut for Windows to put something on the left and right is to press the Windows key and then right or left arrow and release the Windows key. Then select the one you want on the left or right. So I'll close this panel. So another handy shortcut for Windows is the zoom key. If you press CTRL, then the plus to zoom in and negative to zoom out. So we can see here we have our Windows browser on the right. So the only difference if we had to open this manually on the desktop and click on the file is if we make changes on the left in our code editor, you would have to click refresh on the right to see it.
So let's have a look at some Chrome developer tools. We can see here we have our website on the right. We'll just open up our styles and our HTML just to have a look at them. Another handy tip is if you drag one window left or right, it'll pin down underneath the other one. So we'll just put HTML down here and CSS on the top. So one of the main things which is very handy with development tools and stuff you can do to debug, if you see here on your web page server, you can right click and you see on Windows View Page Source. This shows you all the HTML source page. This is all the stuff we have created already. This is handy if you want to find out if you need to copy some code out or if there's an error somewhere. So we close that again. Now for Chrome developer tools, you can hit F12 on your keyboard or go into Chrome settings. But I like to open them up by just right clicking on something I want to have a closer look at to see the HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So let's just click here on this top image, right click and select Inspect in Chrome on Windows. I will expand this now to have a look. And we can see now we have it open. So the first thing that opens up is the Elements tab. Elements means everything on this page. And you can see when we move down, everything gets highlighted as we hover over it. Elements just shows everything connected to the page. We can see here hovering on this paragraph that if we click that paragraph, we can then see on the right the CSS is actually styled that paragraph. We'll have a look at this now again shortly, but next let's have a look at the console. The console is where you're going to see any errors and issues once the page is refreshed. We'll say you have JavaScript warnings or errors or code not working or broke. Or even if you want to debug stuff in JavaScript, you can have it output messages here to make sure every step works in your project. The Sources tab then shows everything. We can see here we have the images, CSS, and index page. Sources just means sources for this document. Network, we can always run diagnostics here to see if something is loading very slowly. One very other important part here then is Lighthouse. Lighthouse will perform speed tests on your page to make sure it's optimized and performs well for Google. So let's have a look. So we go back to Elements. Let's have a look at something that we've already set here, we'll have a look at this image, right click and inspect. We can see here the HTML is selected. We can see the image there and the classes we've selected and set. And on the right, we can see the CSS that's applied to that image and where it actually comes from. We can see here the file is my style. So let's just check this. We can see here when we hover over a particular style in the browser that's been set, we can actually tick it off to see what the changes look like. So if we remove the border radius by unticking this checkbox, you can see the image goes square on the corners. Or if you untick opacity, you can see we remove the opacity. This is just purely in your browser and will not affect your project. This is very handy because you can actually set stuff in your browser just to test to see how things would look if you were to change it in your project. Let's just go here in the browser and we'll go from, instead of 0.5 opacity, we'll set it to 0. And we can see on the left all our images have disappeared. We put it back again. How cool is that? Also, if we look down here, we'll see image style has opacity set. We can see here our image responsive class we created with 100% height auto. Let's just tick this off and see what happens. Max width 100%. Yep, just as suspected, all the images now go to their entire width and they don't be responsive. Let's just put that back on again. We can see here then, another very important part is the user agent style sheet. User agent style sheet is just a style sheet that's defaulted in every browser, just in case the CSS doesn't work on some website. We can always override this user agent style sheet. We can see here the tag for image just says some overflow clip margin set. This is just standard. We can override that if we want and do something else with it. So another very handy thing we can see here all the way down on the bottom is the CSS box model. The middle is the element we selected. We can see if there's padding. I'll just zoom in a bit on this here. We can see if there's any padding on it, which there isn't. And there's no border set on it. Remember, we have border radius, there's no actual border set. And there's no margin. So let's just stay on the box model for a while. We can see here, we'll select one of our buttons we've already styled. So if you right click and inspect, it'll show you the HTML here, which we can see, and the CSS on the right. We can see all the CSS we set and the style, my style.css, our own style sheet here on the right to tell us where that's located. We can see the button nav, the btn class, everything we've connected to it. And if we scroll all the way down here, I'll just zoom in here again, this is important. We can see here the size of it, and you can see it being highlighted on the left on the page. Here's the element. We can see the padding we've set. Remember, we set the top and bottom to 5 pixels and left and right to 10 pixels in our CSS. And we can see here it has a tiny border around it, which we also set. And we can see here it doesn't have margins. Let's just pick on something else now. We'll check this H1 here. So right click on the H1 and inspect. And we can see the box model here, the size of the element. The fact that there's no padding, we didn't put padding on it. We have no border put on it. But you can see here it actually has a margin. This is the margin large top bottom class we've already put on. We can see it's given top and bottom margin. And there's no margin on the left and right, just as we've already done. This is very handy. Another very important thing here, I'll just zoom out, is the fact that you can preview your project on a mobile device. Ctrl and minus to zoom out. So up here on the top, you can see a small picture of a mobile with a little line over it. If you click on that, this is how our device will look on a mobile, our web page will look on mobile. And you can see we have yet to fix our navigation links for mobile. How cool is that? This is what it would look like on your phone. You can see here dimensions in top left. I just have it defaulted set to iPhone. You can set that to any phone type you want to see what it looks like. Here's Samsung Galaxy, iPad Air. So let's just go back to iPhone SE. We can see here we have the settings, we have the size on the top left, and we have the percentage view. If we put this to 100, it just shows us bigger on the screen. And we can see here the phone turning around symbol. If you select that, I'll just zoom out again. If you select that, then you can see what your website or web page would look like if someone turns their phone to the side. This is very handy to see how it's going to perform and look like on different screen sizes, to make sure there's no unusual things happening in it. How cool is that? So Chrome developer tools are very important. We can turn off mobile again by clicking here on the top left button. We can expand the sections also to suit whatever we want, and zoom in and zoom out on our project. Let's just have another deeper look here. We'll go into our style sheet. We'll click on one of these H1s. This is the main H1 here. Right click and inspect. We can see here it gets selected. So when you click that, you can see here everything's set in the user agent style sheet for default H1s. And if you right click and inspect on this HTML reference here, we can see it's H2. And we can see here what we've set in our styles. We can see H2 is a font weight bold. And like we've done already in our style sheet, we can see all the styles applied. Text transform uppercase and text decoration none. And like we said, we can edit these by clicking them off and see what changes happen. Uppercase, lowercase, text decoration none, or highlight. And we can actually click on the style sheet here, my styles.css, if we want to go a bit deeper and see in our own style sheet where that CSS is located. And here just selected H2.
So to get the files used in this example, the HTML reference project, just go to the GitHub link that's down in the description of this video. You can have a look at it here. So a GitHub repository is just a location on the internet hosted by a company called Git that most developers like to share or store their code in, either for their own use or to share with other developers. The repository on GitHub is just a folder used to store code or files, etc. Let's have a look at each folder. So when we're in the repository here, you can see the name of the repository there, actions along the top. You can see the main folder here, and there's a README file too. So if you want, you can just click onto the folders and see what's inside them and download the code from there. But to get all the code, you're going to go over here to the code button. We're going to click and download zip file. Once that's downloaded, go into your downloads folder. Then we need to extract it. So we're going to Windows, you're going to right click and extract all. Now let's just have a look at these files in VS Code. So we're going to go to our desktop. We're going to open up Visual Studio Code. And now we're going to open the folder that we just extracted. Open folder on the left. And we're going to go to Downloads. And here we are. And you can see here on the Explorer view on the left, there's the folder we can click to expand. And here's the reference project folder. And here's the HTML file, so we'll click on that, and there's the code. You can use this for reference or to rebuild your project if something goes wrong.
Hi, I hope you found this video helpful. If so, please like, share, comment and subscribe so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos in the Web Development for Beginners playlist. See you next time.